So I understand we're on air, and I would like to welcome those people who are joining me in person, and I would like to welcome those who are joining me online at Church of Light TV that we're so proud of. And before we get started this evening, I should probably tell you, I'm Alan McRae, and this is Understanding the Minor Arcana of the Egyptian Tarot. And before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. Yvette Fortin's class on CC Zhang's Esoteric Psychology has one more session, and that will be Sunday, August 29th, and that will be from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. That's a Sunday. Coming up, Christopher Gibson is hosting Astrological Indicators for Success. That's going to be a 6-week Thursday evening class beginning September 9th, running through October 14th, and that will go from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, right here at Church of Light TV. Every other Sunday, besides Service Sunday, Vega Osiki is here at headquarters in this very room, conducting a very nice conversation about building blocks of astrology. Unfortunately, those classes are not streamed live, but those people who live locally are really missing out if they don't attend Vega's class. And my class will probably end this evening. And I know that my class was advertised as a 6-week class. There was a little glitch in communication in that area. And we apologize to those folks who have donated perhaps an inappropriate amount for the duration of my class, which will only be 2 nights. So please contact Christina and ask her to either refund you or to credit your donation towards another class. Last week we had a 10-minute break at the hour. This week we're not going to do that, just in the interest of saving time. I have a little more information that might fit into 2 hours, so we're going to move right along here. Last week, we reviewed the architecture of the Brotherhood of Light deck as it corresponds to astrology, and we got as far as the 4s that are anchored by the sovereign. And so with that, we will continue. The 4s and Major Arcanum 4. 4s are anchored by Major Arcanum 4, the sovereign. The result or realization of the action represented by Isis unveiled. Thus, the key word for the sovereign is realization, or it could also mean manifestation. Ruled by Scorpio, other significant key words for the sovereign is sex, reproduction, spirit world, death, psychism, other people's money, taxes, and conquest. The key phrase for the 4 of Scepters is a legacy. Some of the other meanings for this 4 of Scepters are rulership, influences by people in authority, successful enterprise, good business credit, and negotiations completed. The 4 of Scepters represents the Leo decadent sub-ruled by the Sun. The Leo decadent of Leo, sub-ruled by the Sun, and represented by the constellation Crater, a furnace, or a cup of fire. Leo and Leo. Sounds pretty hot. Probably is. This decadent represents a fiery love nature and a desire and ability to rule others. The ruling tendency, if not restrained, may incline toward domination. But if the love energy can be channeled properly, I love that term, love energy, success is sure to follow. This decadent represents a tendency to either allow pleasure-seeking or to counter the weakness with celibacy to dominate the life, neither of which is a healthy expression of the finer qualities of this decadent. The key word for the astrological interpretation of this card is rulership. An old Bible story goes that Nebuchadnezzar built a fiery furnace heated 7 times hotter than was customary. The furnace was built to punish 3 men of God who refused to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's earthly power. So hot was the furnace that the men who were ordered to cast the dissenters into the flame perished from the intense heat. The companions of God, however, had formed spiritual associations for their desires, and when Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace, he saw the 3 of them walking about unharmed, and with them a 4th, who appeared like the Son of God. Leo rules desires and the will to manifest them. This story teaches that all desires associated with earthly power have the capability to sear the soul, while if associations are spiritual, they will protect the soul and lift it into everlasting life in the spiritual realms. So, the spiritual message is to learn to like anything, associate with it as many pleasurable thoughts and sensations as possible. Questions on this one?
It's too hot to handle.
Just too hot to handle. The 4 of Cups seems to represent the manifestation of good things in general. The key phrase for the outer meaning of this card is increase in the family. And most of the time, that's exactly what it means. However, the increase in the family could be a pet or a visitor. In other words, whatever it is, it must be fed. Other interpretations for the outer meaning of this card are enduring love, great joys are in store, a strong and lasting friendship, loving parental care, and emotional intuitiveness. The astrological interpretation of this card is based on the Scorpio decanate of Scorpio, sub-ruled by Pluto, and keyword resourcefulness. Here we see, pictured in the skies, I'm going to call him Ophiuchus, because I don't know. Ophiuchus, good enough. Ophiuchus wrestling with a large serpent representing man's struggle with his animal desires. Zane calls this sex decanate, the sex decanate, and explains that not through suppression can the serpent be overcome, but through the guidance of the surplus energy into proper channels, such as strenuous activity, healing, creative ideas, and diverse goals. Because those born under this sign are never at a loss for plans to overcome difficulties, probably because they get a lot of practice. The key word for this decanate is resourcefulness. The spiritual message of this card again stems from the constellation of Ophiuchus and a life or death struggle with serpents, symbol of that energy generated through the union of polar opposites. Zane writes, Genesis 32 relates that Jacob wrestled, and I need to go back to this picture because there's Jacob over there. Jacob wrestled throughout the night with God in the form of a man. Prevailing not against Jacob, God touched his thigh, and it was out of joint. Likewise, Ophiuchus, somewhat crippled with his thigh out of joint, does not wrestle with a man, but with the serpent of generation. From this account, we are reminded that the thigh is ruled by Sagittarius, the sign of religion, and the message of this story relates to the problems resulting from religious practices that deny the ever-insistent force of creative energy. The key is to honor rather than to deny this creative force. Hence, the spiritual message. Continual kindness between the sexes generates a power by which the heights may be scaled. A power indeed. The Four of Coins generally stands for the manifestation of money, and its key phrase is money from a partner. Some other interpretations of this card could be gift from a friend, unexpected financial gain, profit through invention, increase in wages, or new avenue of realization. The astrological meaning of this card stems from the Aquarius decanate of Aquarius, sub-ruled by Uranus, and the constellation of Equus, and that is a mouthful. Because the horse was mankind's fastest mode of transportation from eons past, the ancients have long used the horse as a universal symbol of the speedy conveyance of ideas and knowledge. The constellation of Equus is pictured in the heavens as the head of a horse, and there is Equus over there in the far right. Excluding the body, which represents the intelligence factor of a horse, not his physical attributes. Even in today's vernacular, the term horse sense, old-fashioned as it may be, is an expression meaning common sense, sound, prudent judgment, or the practical opinions of ordinary people. Because this decanate is ruled by Uranus, the planet of the individualist, the key word for this card is originality. We are also reminded that conventional wisdom and academics must be balanced by individual experience. And we as individuals must take advantage of all knowledge that comes our way that will enable us to be more successful in life. Hermetic astrology teaches that the natal chart is a useful tool for understanding one's natural abilities and weaknesses in character. And with this understanding, one can influence his experiences in life. The zodiacal signs most closely related to the knights are Gemini and Sagittarius, because both these signs are associated with horses and thoughts. In Roman mythology, the Gemini twins were considered to be patrons of horses and their special battalion of knights. Gemini rules early education and day-to-day mental activity. Sagittarius, the centaur, half man and half horse, rules higher education and philosophy. Gemini and Sagittarius are opposite on the zodiac. And here we have a picture of the Gemini twins on a horse, which I understand to be the original sign. And then somewhere along the line, the horse went away and the twins were left behind. But Gemini's traditionally been associated with horses. So thoughts come and go at a furious pace, and back in the days when tarot was developed, horses were the fastest mode of transportation. Therefore, horses became a symbol of thoughts. And here are our tarot thoughts, the horseman. C.C. Zane also points out that our thoughts have the ability to carry us away. The horsemen in our Brotherhood of Light deck represent thoughts, and the spiritual message is: next to love, man's most useful companion is knowledge, and in particular, the knowledge of the manner in which the planets influence human life and destiny. Any comments there? Okay, we'll move on to Four of Swords. The Four of Swords. This card showed up in the wrong place last week, but it's in the right place tonight. The Four of Swords generally represents generally a realization or manifestation of hardship. Its key phrase is remorse for past action. A few other interpretations might be unfortunate romance, financial reverses, death of an artistic venture, hoarding of possessions, and patience is rewarded, which would have to do with the Taurus weekend.
Death of an artistic venture.
Death of an artistic venture.
Oh, that means like if you have you're engaged in some artistic idea and it just doesn't pan
It just
out.
doesn't work out.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. I know.
And that's the
Another
Venus.
the Venus influence.
It's the Venus, the influence, and the death.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the death
and the swords.
The swords. Yeah.
The
hardship.
ending of some
Yeah.
hardship.
Things just aren't going right with your. Maybe you should have another look. Yeah.
My mom, when we first moved to the United States, worked at a factory, and she was an artist. And she used to say it's really hard to work in a factory and then come home and think high and lofty thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
And so that would be the card.
That would be the card.
I can see that.
In other words, yeah, a bad environment for artistic
Right.
creativity and flow. Absolutely. The astrological significance of the Four of Swords is based upon the Taurus decanate of Taurus, Lepus, sub-ruled by Venus. Those born under this decanate are said to possess great powers of magic, healing, and mental force. Because Taurus rules the second house of money and possession, there is often a tendency under this decanate to spend too much time on the acquisition of wealth. This trait, coupled with the native's natural ability to acquire mediumistic and magical skills, is a great recipe for black magic. And when I think of this, I think of the TV show The Mentalist. You guys ever watch that?
Oh, yeah.
And he does not claim to be a psychic, although he has psychic experience. He has psychic abilities, we all know. And he had used them in the past to make a lot of money and to take advantage of people. And then he spends his time now working for the police department trying to do good. But he can still go to the casinos and rack up a bundle when he wants to. The rabbit, here he is there. It's kind of a very modern image of a rabbit fleeing. The rabbit symbolizing this decanate in the heavens is seen running in great haste from the negative influences of materialism. Hence, it takes a lot of energy and determination to focus one's gifts upon spiritual purposes. The key word for the inner astrological meaning of this card is determination. Zane writes about the spiritual text of this decanate, quote, "Fleeing the section of the zodiac where cataclysmic struggle takes place, Scorpio, the hare turns its back on the scene of various inequities. Like the constellated rabbit, the biblical Lot made safe escape from Sodom and Gomorrah." And here we see on the right a picture of Sodom and Gomorrah, and there is his wife, pillar of salt. Like the constellated rabbit, the biblical Lot made safe escape from Sodom and Gomorrah by not looking back. His wife, unable to resist visualizing and looking back at the things she feared, crystallized into a pillar of salt. The rabbit not only shows great determination in fleeing the gross and the sensual, but does not look at or think about the thing which, if permitted to do so, would cause paralyzing fear. So this story is about visualization. It means that when we positively desire a thing, we visualize its image, and the thought cells belonging to that department of life work to manifest that reality. But when we visualize an image of that which we fear, or we visualize in fear, the thought cells work just as hard to carry out those orders. So this story is a reminder to mind what we are thinking, visualizing, and fearing. The spiritual message for the Four of Swords is, one of man's greatest enemies is fear. Any questions on this or comments?
That determination, that's the key. That's just the key word.
That's just the key word. Yeah, for the astrological meaning, or one of the inner meanings.
The inner meaning.
Right.
Okay.
So now we move on to the fives. Arcanum 5, the Hierophant, or sometimes called the Pope, is ruled by Jupiter. His key words are religion, law, ethics, goodwill, abundance, generosity, benevolence, faith, charity, joviality, and basically plain old good luck. Therefore, the fives of the minor arcana generally are a symbol of good luck. The 5 of Scepters' outer meaning, key phrase, is good fortune in business. Other key phrases might be gain through speculation, theatrical success, inspiration through religion, practice faith, and goodwill of customers and clients.
So the speculation comes from the fact that it's the Leo influence?
Yes.
This house influence?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm really getting this. All of a sudden, in my vocabulary for these cards is starting to expand.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. I'm glad to hear that. The inner astrological meaning of this is based upon the Sagittarius decanate of Leo, Centaurus, ruled by Jupiter. Centaurus is pictured in the heavens, and I don't have a picture of him here, so let's just go back. Centaurus is pictured in the heavens as a being with the body of a horse and the upper torso of a man. He is impaling the wolf that is pictured in the last decanate of Libra. He was the woodsman in the story of the Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf symbolizes those who use their intellects to suppress truth and sow the seeds of ignorance and superstition in order to profit by exploitation. As those born in this decanate have powerful persuasive abilities, it is important for them to take care not to disseminate the wrong information. So the key word for this decanate is reformation or reform. Now we can go to the slang. There are 2 centaurs in the heavens. The decanate Centaurus is the smaller of the 2, occupying 10 degrees, while Sagittarius occupies 30 degrees. Both are ruled by Jupiter and relate to gifts and the higher mind. Zane writes, quote, Santa Claus, like the horsemen or centaurs in the sky, one of which is like, Zane is hard to read, so let me go back. Santa Claus, like the horsemen or centaurs in the sky, one of which relates to the time of winter's cold and the other to the heat of summer, portrays 2 seasons of the year. In other words, Santa Claus portrays 2 seasons of the year. Zane goes on to explain that Santa's garb is chiefly red, representing the constellated centaur next to the fiery furnace crater, and white to denote the snow of winter. Santa not only promises gifts, but also the return of summer. Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is associated with benevolence and religion. Just as Santa promises material gifts and the return of summer, so religion promises spiritual blessings after the hard days of earth are done. The gifts of Santa Claus, as represented by the smaller constellation of Centaurus, while pleasurable, are not as great as the gifts promised by a spiritual endeavor. Such a spiritual endeavor is dependent on what is done for others. Hence, the spiritual message is more blessed to give than to receive, and to receive in full measure, we must first give of that which we already have. And here, I would like to point out, here's Jupiter over here. He is just so awesome. Sitting on his big throne, all these people adoring him, and he just seems to be granting love and abundance to all. Here we have The Ghost of Christmas Past from Charles Dickens, and he's usually portrayed much like Jupiter, you can see, with his Santa Claus outfit and his garland of, luscious abundance, and he's always surrounded by presents. And here we have Burger King. And he's pretty much the same type of character, isn't he? And I never think of him as, abundance, but I guess Burger King wants to make you think you're getting a lot of food when you go there. And then, of course, we have jolly old Santa here in the corner with his red and white garb on. So next we have the Five of Cups. The key phrase for the outer meaning of this card is good fortune in love. Again, you notice all of these are good fortune because they're anchored to the Hierophant. Other interpretations might be a deep-seated attachment, steadfast affections, benefit from hidden influences, and that comes from Uranus, and domestic illusions. The astrological inner meaning of the Five of Cups is based on the Pisces decanate of Scorpio, sub-ruled by Uranus. Sub-ruled by Uranus. The constellation Ara is pictured in the heavens as an altar burning with smoke and flame of a sacrifice. Let's see what I've got here. Oh no, let's go back. That comes later. Okay, so the constellation Ara is pictured in the heavens as an altar burning with the smoke and flame of a sacrifice. Here we find the aggression and self-centeredness of Scorpio, ruled by Mars, tempered with a self-sacrificing aspect of Pisces. This decanate reminds us that there usually comes a time in one's life when personal gratification must be sacrificed on the altar of duty and devotion to others. The key word for the Five of Cups, therefore, is responsibility. Now then, we are all familiar with the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain, angered by his brother's fortune, was taken over by jealousy, the lower side of Scorpio, and killed his brother Abel. This story might have found its origins in a far older Egyptian story of Seth and Osiris, who were also brothers. Seth ruled Lower Egypt, while Osiris ruled Upper Egypt. And here Seth is on the left side, and Osiris is on the right side. However, it was Osiris who brought the knowledge of growing crops to his people. It was Osiris who then brought law to his people, and his people flourished. Seth, who later became known as the god ruling the barren desert, was jealous of his brother's fame and fortune, and wanted to rule all of Egypt himself, and so he too killed his brother Osiris. Abel and Osiris are both remembered and revered today as perhaps the first martyrs for good, and Cain and Seth are both considered as the first murderers or ancestors of evil.
Interesting that his staff is upside down, like the sign of, is that Mercury, or the staff of Seth is like upside down. And
Right. Vega's pointing out that his staff, that Seth's staff is upside down, which is a sign of evil.
mm-hmm.
The message and the spiritual text for the Five of Cups is, by sacrificing one's animal thoughts, desires, and pleasures upon the altar of aspiration to higher things, it is possible to possess intellectual and spiritual pleasures that yield a far keener delight. Okay, the next card is the Five of Coins. Remembering that Major Arcanum 5 generally means good luck, this card's outer meaning key phrase is abundant wealth. The thing to remember if you see this card come up in a reading is that abundant wealth is relative. What one person considers abundant wealth may not be what the other person considers abundant wealth.
Can you go back a slide?
Sure.
Oh. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Peggy had a comment that
Sub-rulership should be Neptune, not
Right.
Uranus.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
exactly
Neptune,
right.
yeah, that's right, I'm sorry, I
For the
misspoke there.
five of, well, for the
Right.
five of cups,
Right.
yeah.
Right, it should be, that is correct, and that was a mistake, I do apologize. Okay, so we talked about wealth being relative. So a better interpretation might be something like, money will probably not be an issue, or you'll have enough money to get your bills paid. Other interpretations for this card are reward for writing, teaching, or lecturing, a trip for achievement, study for future success, money through original ideas, or settlement for funds.
So Allie, if you're in the middle of, if you're doing a reading and this card comes up and you know, you have all of these possibilities, is it the context?
It's definitely the context.
of,
Right, it's the context of the question,
uh-huh.
and it is also the position of the card. So
Okay.
there's all kinds of things to think about. It's when you're figuring out a chart, you have to kind of put a bunch of things together.
Right.
It's the same way with reading cards.
Uh-huh.
So reward for writing, teaching, or lecturing would certainly apply if the person was asking a question like, you know, I'm thinking about taking up I'm thinking about being I'm thinking about going into advertising, where I'm going to be writing a lot of ad copy, and this card comes up. It's a pretty good bet that that person will be successful at that.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So yeah, it all depends on what's going on.
So, and then the study for future success, that's for the future coming from the Aquarius?
Mercury.
Mercury.
Well, the study, I can see that being Mercury, but where does the future come from?
Future
Well,
success
again,
is
if it came up in the future, or if it came up, you know, if it comes up in a reading, like if you're reading for a student and they're saying, is this going to be worth it?
Oh, okay, got
And
it.
you get this card. So
Okay, got
that's
it.
why these cards are, you know, these are just
It's so
examples.
nuanced.
It's
Yeah.
very nuanced. It's totally
Right.
nuanced.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's difficult.
Right.
You know,
So that's why it's really important to remember the placement of the card when you're like doing the 7-card question.
Right.
You know, which, you know, past, present, future, you
Right.
know, environment. You know, you have to remember that.
Yeah,
in order
you do.
to place it into this context.
yes, it's all about the context.
Well, you know, I've never used the other decks, but it seems to me like these cards are really rich with meaning.
Absolutely. I mean, you can see, you know, you've got 3 astrological symbols on here.
Right.
And then you've got a
The
student.
elements.
You've got the elements, then you've got the major arcanum, and then you have the position to think about and the question.
Right.
So there's a lot to ponder,
Uh-huh.
and they are rich with a lot, and not to mention all the spiritual meanings
Right.
that can be applied if you're reading for yourself or someone who wants that kind of message.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So the inner key word for this card is inspiration, and it's based upon the Gemini decanate of Aquarius, sub-ruled by Mercury, and pictured in the heavens as Pegasus, the winged horse. I love this picture. Uplifting wings on a horse, once again a symbol of the mind, indicates the ability to leave the material body, if only in the mind, to glean information and inspiration from the astral and spiritual realms. This may be achieved consciously. Through practice, the nervous system can be made sensitive to vibrations, or quite by accident, say in a dream state. Once this ability is recognized, a never-ending source of information and inspiration becomes available. The combination of Aquarius, Gemini, and Mercury bring creative talents, especially in the areas of writing and communication. But the information and inspiration gleaned in this way can be applied to all aspects of creativity and problem solving. The spiritual message of this card is under special circumstances, while still maintaining physical life, it is possible for man to free himself from the physical body, to visit the homes of the dead, to enter the halls of learning, and to bring back in full consciousness the knowledge gained in higher spheres. So, are there any comments about this, gaining knowledge from other spheres? I find if I'm dwelling on a problem, oftentimes I wake up in the morning and my very first thought is the answer to that problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't even know I have a problem. And I'll very first wake up in the morning and be reminded that I did, and here's the solution. And that happens quite often to me, and I've learned to rely on it.
Right. I have done the same thing. If I have a real issue that it's really baffling to me.
Yes.
I keep sort of thinking about it over and over again. Then after I let it go and go to sleep,
Yes.
next morning.
Right. And I think that's the genesis of, sleep on it. That old expression,
Right.
just sleep on it.
Right.
That's kind of a common expression.
Well, and I think that's what that whole extension of consciousness thing is.
Yes.
You have this really powerful desire energy,
Yeah.
and that desire just
It just reaches
takes
out
you
there.
out there,
Yeah.
and
It absolutely. It just takes you there. Takes you away like the Pegasus, like the winged horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really a very cool analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, the last card, anchored by Major Arcanum 5, even though it is a sword, is still lucky. The key phrase for the outer meaning of the Five of Swords is escape from danger. Other interpretations could be discrimination replaces impulsiveness, alertness pays off, benefit from reorganization of workspace, I love that one, overcome religious adversity, and quarrels about possession. The key word for the astrological meaning of the Five of Swords is struggle. And I put there, or combat for supremacy, which I'll get into later. In this second decadent of Taurus.
I'm sorry, it's my husband's moon placement. Combat for supremacy. Seems so appropriate.
We'll just look into this character a little further.
Can you go back to the other slide just a minute? It wasn't up there very long.
Escape from danger, discrimination replaces impulsiveness, alertness pays off. These are
I
all
want to
written
make sure
down.
they're getting the card.
Oh, the card. Oh, I see.
Are some of these Doris Doan?
All of them are.
Oh, they just sound so Doris Doan.
Right. They all are. Okay, so where was I? Oh, yes. In this second decanate of Taurus, the fixity of this sign is challenged by the analytical, Vegas, the analytical aspect of Virgo, and consequently, some previously accepted condition of the environment is focused upon and a conflict arises. Usually this conflict reflects a struggle to be better than before. So, hey, he's trying. Virgonian style. Another key phrase to use here might be, and I have noted it on the slide, which caused a lot of chuckling around here, is a combat for supremacy. The spiritual message of this card is related to us through the picture of Orion in the heavens, holding up his club against the mighty enraged bull rushing at him. Orion does not attempt to retreat from the problem of the bull, like the timid hare that scampers away from beneath his feet. Orion squarely faces his environmental challenge, whatever that may be. Zane writes from Spiritual Astrology, no situation in life should cause the soul to quail, and quail means lose courage. Whatever physical disaster may come, whatever distasteful thing may be uncovered in the recesses of the unconscious mind, it is always better to face it squarely, to recognize it for what it is, and then to formulate plans by which the situation may best be met. End quote. The spiritual message of the Five of Swords is the task of the soul on every plane of manifestation is to struggle with and overcome the limitations of its environment.
Must be that environment.
Yeah, but he's struggling with it.
He's still there.
He's still there. Okay, let's move on to the sixes before we just laugh ourselves silly. Major Arcanum 6, the two paths, in most decks is called the Lovers. When I was reading other decks, I could not for the life of me understand why the key word for this card was choice ever. Because the only lady that was on the card was the naked lady. From this image, I mean, that was the only one. It was her. From this image, we can see more clearly why choice and temptations are key words for this Major Arcanum 6. One woman is dressed chastely, representing virtue, and one is bare-breasted and crowned with the fruit of the vine, representing vice. Major Arcanum 5, the Hierophant, educates us about ethics, law, and religion, and now we are tested to see which one we will choose. Usually when this card turns up, the choice is between what is probably right versus what is easy and momentarily desirable. This card is ruled by Venus, and as such, it also pertains to beauty and the arts. And some of the other key words are dilemma, possible consequences, trial, test, love, beauty, sensuality, the arts, affection, can't say no. That's where we get the term venereal disease from Venus, and peer pressure. And this card rules the venous system, where the blood is pushed through the bloodstream, pushed through, which would be that pushing peer pressure thing. Mm-hmm. So our first minor is the Six of Scepters. The key phrase for the Six of Scepters is music, art, or drama. This could, of course, mean the study of saying, an artsy environment, or a profession in the arts. Other key phrases might be powerful love nature, social activity to promote business, ability to rule others in business, the soft sell brings more success, reliance on good taste. See, the soft sell brings more success would be one of those things where if you had a salesman come up and say, how come I'm not doing well in my car dealership? And this card comes up, you can say, well, because you're pushing too hard. Be relaxed. Soft sell is better.
And the well, Aries and Leo seem pretty intense to me.
Well,
it's the influence of the six, and so it's the influence of the six is to soften it.
Yeah, it's a softening, taking the hard
the Venus influence. Okay, got it.
Right. The astrological keyword for this card is ambition, and here we see more of that Aries Leo. As this is the Aries decanate of Leo. In this last decade of Leo, there is the love of power and rulership coupled with the leadership skills of Aries. As a result, ambition determines a rise in life regardless of the obstacles. This ambition may be squandered on self-aggrandizement or more ideally channeled for the benefit of universal welfare. The spiritual message of the Six of Scepters is related. That's not the right. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
Corvus.
It is.
Yeah.
The spiritual message of the Six of Scepters is related through the Greek mythology of how the raven came to wear a black cloak. And I really like this story. Once upon a time, when Raven was purest white, and there he is in the lower right-hand corner. You can find anything on Google image.
That's amazing, isn't it?
When Raven was purest white, Apollo, the sun god, fell deeply in love with Coronis and became very jealous and possessive of her. Apollo asked the white raven to spy upon Coronis. Of course, it is common knowledge that those who secretly pry into the lives of others rarely learn anything complimentary about them. And so it was that Raven discovered Coronis' love for another man. Raven came back to Apollo with plenty of gossip and took great delight in telling the story and adding an embellishment here and there just for fun. Apollo, broken-hearted and enraged at the reports of his sweetheart's infidelity, shot Coronis through the heart, which you see in the left-hand picture there. Ever since that fateful day, the scandal-mongering Raven was compelled to wear a cloak of black so that all might know him as a gossip. Freud explained that those who find a healthy expression for their creative energies are not given to gossip. They are not interested in the scandalous affairs of others because their own love natures have been completely satisfied. But the scandalmonger, in telling and hearing about the morbid affairs of others, takes part in these acts vicariously. To the extent an individual talks about and thinks about that which is either debasing or heroic, so does his character become. The spiritual message of the Six of Scepters, therefore, is man tends to become that which he most talks about and thinks about. And this is actually repeated over and over and over again in these spiritual messages. What we, like the old adage, what we eat, we look like, and what we think about, we become, or what we think about, we manifest. The key phrase for the Six of Cups, as you might imagine, is a love affair. Now, we don't mean here a committed relationship. This card means a love affair, or a love attraction that may be unrequited. Other mundane meanings for this card may be: beware the allurement of vice, carefully analyze your emotions, personal magnetism attracts, happy family event, guard against changeable loyalty. The Cancer
Can you go
deacon.
back, please?
Sure. Are you focusing?
Yeah, I was writing.
Okay. Is it good? Is all good? I'm getting a yes, so I'm going on. Okay. The Cancer Deaconate of Scorpio reveals the potency of sexual energy when sublimated to attain physical and mental achievement. It seems, however, that those born under the influence of this sign achieve their greatest success when there is a person of the opposite sex in their life to stimulate their ambitions and ideals. Social life, therefore, is always an important factor in contributing to or detracting from fulfillment in life. The astrological key word for the Six of Cups is attainment. It was the custom in ancient Greece to crown the victors of the Pythian Games with a laurel wreath. The laurel wreath was also used to adorn the heads of those in high offices and later came to denote academic honors. Today, we use the terms poet laureate or Nobel laureate, meaning generally the one who has achieved excellence. One seeking the universal laurel crown must, by his thoughts, feelings, and actions, serve as an example. His or her energies must be devoted to helping others and contributing toward their utmost toward universal welfare. But adapting the life on Earth to maximum usefulness is still not enough. He or she also recognizes that earthly life in human form is only one link to an endless chain of existences. To know what will be advantageous in the afterlife, and also to contact those of greater wisdom who dwell there, it is necessary through the development of the senses of the astral body to hear and feel and even travel on the astral plane. Zane writes in Spiritual Astrology, holding to the pattern of life which calls for maximum service for the common good, they acquire knowledge of occult laws and develop their abilities to use occult forces in a constant endeavor to increase the scope of usefulness. So here I have the laurel crown. Here is this idea of gleaning information from the astral and spiritual, and this is, I just Googled universal welfare and I got this little
Wow,
picture.
that's what you got for universal welfare?
That's what I got for universal welfare.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Isn't that awesome? I liked it.
It's a little clunky.
Well, if love is feeding the
Feeding
That
the
was a
masses.
joke.
yeah.
So, the spiritual message of this card is, men should be esteemed not because of their race, color, sex, or ancestry, but for what they have accomplished for the common good. The true monarch is he who renders greatest service to his fellow man. Yeah, it's interesting on Google. You know, you can just Google like wisdom. I'll show you wisdom later. It's very cool. I love Google. The mundane key phrase for the Six of Coins is a social event. Other mundane interpretations might be profit from social affairs, reward through humanitarian activities, merger for money, creative partnership for profit, gain through original ideas. The inner astrological keyword for the Six of Coins is repression. This is the Libra decadent of Aquarius. This feeling of being suppressed, put down, shut up, oppressed, and otherwise overtaken, and not allowed to express oneself openly and freely, often turns up in, guess what? Marital relationships. Particularly in those marriages that are not based on love, but are subservient to material ambitions. And believe me, I used to work in a salon, and I would hear stories all day long while I'm filing the ladies' nails about how miserable they are because they married a man for their money.
Mm-hmm.
Heard it a lot.
Can you go back? Or only if you're finished with this.
Well, I'm not finished with it. Denying true love in the name of social status or economic security leads to a solitary and lonely existence that can only weaken the soul and thereby lead to a path of destruction. We see this happening in the tabloids and elsewhere in our lives, in our daily lives. Now, do you want me to go back, or shall I?
Well, I don't think they got to see the last chart. It went by so fast, and I was.
Oh,
And he wasn't paying attention.
you mean the last card? Or we're going back a lot, and so
Okay, fine.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, they know what the 5 is. 6. I'll go back if you want me to. Do you want me to go back?
No, that's
Okay. Okay. The spiritual message of this card is really the same. But in order to understand it more fully, let's take a look at this sea creature, Cetus. And here he is, and you can just barely see him. And those folks at home may not be able to see him, I'm not sure. But he looks like a black sort of whale-like thing. When the ancients sought to picture in the heavens the principle which attracts to man failure and disease and presents the greatest obstacles. They realized it was discord. Because it is the emotional or feeling element which determines whether there is harmony or discord, and because water symbolizes the emotions, it would be a denizen of the deep that would come to represent discord. Cetus is a distortion of a whale and is commensurate with the importance of influence it represents in the heavens as the largest of all the constellations. Today, the area in the heavens in which Cetus resides is called simply the water, and Cetus is often called the whale. There are many sources of discord in human life, but the marital decadent of Aquarius makes it clear that it is within a marital relationship that the best opportunity for discord arises. Zane writes in Spiritual Astrology, quote, "Husband and wife are so closely associated that the thought energies and emotional energies of each find ready access to the astral body of the other." Yikes. Nor does the mere avoidance of marriage prevent the development of discord. The basic urge for reproduction is so strong a factor in all normal life that the attempt to stifle it commonly leads to that form of discord denoted by the key word of the decadent, which is repression. Yet, if marriage is to be beneficial, the energy exchange must be harmonious. You will remember from Greek mythology that Queen Cassiopeia boasted that she was more beautiful than Juno. Poseidon took offense and sent Cetus to ravage their coastline. There was no appeasing Cetus except for the sacrifice of Cassiopeia's virgin daughter Andromeda. She was chained naked to a rock on the coastline until Perseus rescued her. Hence, the spiritual text is, the monster which demands the sacrifice of the fairest youths of the land is discord in marriage. Amen. Okay. The key word for the mundane meaning of the Six of Swords is dissipation. Other key words might be budget your energies, struggle can lead to progress, a slow, steady climb to success, scattered energies bring sorrow, delays in affectional matters. Paul, may I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. The astrological meaning of the Six of Swords is mastership. This decadent of Taurus shows the reflective and, yes, controlling influence of Saturn, its sub-ruler. Pictured in the heavens as a charioteer, Auriga, according to Greek legend, am I pronouncing that right? Auriga? According to Greek legend, was born crippled and for years raised in a chest guarded by snakes. But in spite of his physical challenge and unfortunate upbringing, Auriga eventually became king of Athens and invented the chariot to enable his mobility. Unlike Phaethon, the arrogant teenager whose father finally gave in to his desire to take the sun for a joyride across the heavens, almost destroying the earth in the process, Auriga demonstrates true mastership over his environment, holding steadfastly the reins in his strong right hand while holding and protecting a mother goat and her young in his left. And you can see that right here, just barely. The spiritual message of this card is, the function of a master is to control the forces of nature and use them for the protection of the weak and the benefit of all. And now we shall proceed to the seventh. moving right along. The sevens of the Minor Arcana are anchored by the Major Arcana 7, the Conqueror, sometimes called Chariot or Victory in other decks. 7 is the number of fulfillment on the physical plane because of the septenary law in nature. There are many 7s in nature. For example, the 7 visible planets, the 7 colors in the spectrum, 7 notes in an octave, the 8th note being a repeat of the first, 7 chakras, 7 seas, 7 days of the week, and there are more, I'm sure. This arcanum generally means success in overcoming trials and temptations and moving on. And those trials and temptations, of course, would be from those from Major Arcanum 6, right, the 2 hands. Yeah. So, the 7 of Scepters key phrase for it, the mundane meaning, is success in teaching or publishing. Other mundane interpretations for this card might be benevolent influences surround you, keep aims on an ideal level, dissemination of constructive ideas, religious principles applied to business, personal philosophy wins popularity. The key word for the inner astrological meaning of the 7 of Scepters is devotion, as one might expect, as it is the Sagittarius decanate of Sagittarius. The characteristic of this influence is religiosity, which need not be steeped in orthodoxy, but is often expressed through a kinship with nature and a love and sympathy for all living things, great and small. That's how I kind of look at it. The influence of this decanate is an ability to contact the cosmic consciousness through an understanding of an inner voice, through dreams or instincts, and rely upon its guidance. This decanate in the heavens is represented by a harp of 7 strings, lyra. As harmony is set into motion by the vibratory rate of thoughts, it is Mercury, ruler of thoughts, who gave a harp to Orpheus. Orpheus married his true love, Eurydice, who was abducted to the underworld by Pluto. Disconsolate, Orpheus traveled to the underworld where his beautiful music so touched Pluto that he agreed to release Eurydice, provided the musician not look back until out of Pluto's realms. Tragically, Orpheus was unable to abide by Pluto's request and lost his cherished bride forever. Zane writes, quote, "The invisible realm of Pluto can be contacted and controlled through the harmonies engendered by pleasant emotional states and loving thoughts more successfully than in any other way. Looking backward and not forward sets in motion vibrations of the past, attracting external conditions we flee." The spiritual text for the 7 of Scepters is, "On every plane harmony is life, and discord is death." The key phrase for the mundane meaning of the 7 of Cups reflects the moving on aspect of the Conqueror. It is successful change of home. And this is one of those cards that when it comes up, usually this is what it means. There's a move in your future, whether or not there have been plans made or there's something on the horizon that indicates that. I recently did a reading for my neighbor at a party, and I saw this card come up, and I said, "Have you been thinking about moving?" And she was horrified because she hadn't told any of the neighbors, and she had kept it completely to herself. And of course, she didn't want to move or put the house up for sale because of the housing situation now. She's not going to get the money that she's put into the home. So she's not moving, but she wants to move. And she just looked at me with this sort of really weird look on her face, and she said, I never believed in this stuff, but I'm starting to believe it now. So I thought that was really funny. Other phrases that might be used as outer meanings is resolution of domestic discord, gain by unselfish love, devotion to family, sympathy for friends and family, and compassion brings victory. The key word for the inner astrological meaning of this card is verity, which is an old-fashioned word for truth or honesty. The Pisces decanate of Pisces is pictured in the heavens as Cepheus, a king whose foot, here he is over there on the left, a king whose foot rests upon the immovable pole star of truth. He holds a scepter cut from the tree of life, and his crown is surmounted by 7 globes, symbolizing the 7 visible planets and, again, the septenary law in nature. The influence of this decanate is to seek truth, not so much through science, but through the psychic senses, and noticing the esoteric interpretations of all phenomena. And I'd just like to stop for a moment and talk about noticing the esoteric interpretations of all phenomena. This is something that that happened to me once, and it has happened to me several times, actually. And I want to give you an example of what noticing the esoteric interpretations of all phenomena is to me. Before my dad died, I asked him where he wanted his ashes scattered. Is that gum chewing you?
Yeah.
I wanted to know, I asked my dad where he wanted his ashes scattered. And he said to me, being the old sailor that he was, well, I think I want him scattered in the Farallon Islands. And then he started crying and crying so hard. And he didn't want to talk about it anymore. But the Farallons are an island about 26 miles off the coast of Northern California. And out there lives sharks and scientists who study sharks, and it's really a foreboding, miserable, lonely place, and it's hard to get to. And I just didn't feel right with that decision, and coupled with the fact that my dad was crying so much, and he died shortly thereafter, so I never got an answer. And I suffered with that. It was months later, maybe even a year later, that I scattered his ashes. And that whole time I wondered, where should I scatter his ashes? I knew it should be at sea somewhere, because he was such a sailor and loved to be in his boat. And I prayed, and I thought on it, and I dreamt on it, and I slept on it, and I wasn't getting any answers. And one day, I was visiting some friends from out of state, and one of the gentlemen there was telling me how he had just gone to a scattering of ashes on Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. And I looked at him, and it almost went by. It almost went by. And then I realized, bingo, this is the answer. Angel Island. My dad spent years going to Angel Island, sailing around Angel Island, picnicking on Angel Island, really enjoying himself there. And I thought, that's where I'm going to scatter his ashes. And so it came to me in a conversation. And it could come to you in a billboard or a phrase that you hear on television. I had one lady tell me that a sign came to her on the side of a van once. There was something on the van. So that's what noticing the esoteric interpretations of all phenomena means, in my opinion. To understand the spiritual message of the Pisces decanate of Pisces, it is important to remember that the elementals and earthbound discarnate human beings who dwell in the astral close to the vibratory level of the earth are best able to contact us through the conditions represented by Pisces, which is very sort of passive thing, mediumistic. Pisces, however, is a dual sign, and in its higher expression, beliefs are based upon the very rock of truth. Because on higher astral levels, nobler souls research, teach, and aid us. We cannot know the whole truth if we ignore the physical world, nor can we know the whole truth if we ignore the astral world. So here I have this delightful little image. I'd like to know if any of you remember what this is from. The truth is out there.
Boom.
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
X-Files.
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 Couldn't
The
remember
truth
some
is
guy.
out there. And when they're looking at it, they're thinking of, they're talking aliens, right? But I'm using this as the truth is out there. You know, right, in another way. But the truth is out there. So, the spiritual text for the Seven of Cups, therefore, is the Hermetic axiom, as it is above, so it is below, and that which is below is like unto that which is above. And you try to say that 5 times fast. Okay.
But that's a comforting thought.
That as it is above, so it is below.
Well, that it, I mean, even if you can't see what's out there, you can learn about it by observing what's here.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a very good way to look at it. The key phrase for the mundane interpretation of our next card, the Seven of Coins, is money earned through a journey. Other mundane interpretations might be directed mental energy solves a problem, profit from writing, teaching, or publishing, communication leading to financial gain, cash in a letter, I love that one, and intellectual victory. The key word for the astrological inner meaning of the Seven of Coins and the Gemini decanate of Gemini, sub-ruled by Venus, is intuition. This constellation is pictured in the sky as Ursa Minor, the smaller of the 2 bear constellations positioned near the immovable pole star of truth. As a matter of fact, the pole star is located on the tip of Ursa Minor's tail. There is no better way to explain this inner interpretation and ultimately arrive at the spiritual message of this card than by relating to you C.C. Zane's version of the storybook tale, Goldilocks. He named the Papa Bear Reason. He named the Mama Bear Impulse. And he named the Baby Bear Intuition. During an unusually long walk through the forest, picking flowers one day, Goldilocks came upon a house, and finding no one home, took it upon herself to enter. On the kitchen table, she found 3 bowls of porridge, 1 large, 1 medium, and 1 small, cooling while the family of 3 bears went for a short outing in the woods. As you will recall, it was the smallest bowl, or intuition's bowl, that was just right. Goldilocks then went on to try out the chairs of the household and then the beds upstairs. And in each case, it was intuition's chair and bed that was just right. Well, Goldilocks, after all this breaking and entering, was tired, so she fell asleep in Intuition's bed. It was Baby Bear, Intuition, who discovered her there and tried to wake her, gently, in a quiet, moody voice. But Papa and Mama, Reason and Impulse, came rushing toward the bed so fast that Goldilocks became frightened and ran away, even though Baby Bear only wanted to play with her. And the moral of the story is put forth as Zane writes from Spiritual Astrology, quote, No time is quite so easy as a rule to hear the voice of intuition as in this transition from the sleeping to the waking state. But its promptings must be carefully listened for and noted before thoughts, aka reason and impulse, begin to clamor in the mind. Like the little bear's tail, intuition is in constant touch with the truth, if only it can be carefully heeded. The spiritual text of this card is only through intuition does man contact the real underlying truth of being, the truth of things. And as we talked about before, it's that time when we first wake up that our answers come to us. And I need 1 minute here to get the rest of my notes. And put these over here so I don't let them fall all over the place. Just have a little drink. Just have a little drink. The last of the sevens is the Seven of Swords. The key phrase for the mundane meaning of this card is danger through travel or sport. This is an obvious combination of the conqueror moving along on his chariot, ruled by sporty Sag, and the swords, always carrying a warning of some sort. Other mundane interpretations for this card might be progress follows conflict, a positive slant. Victory through hard work. Adverse publicity from co-workers. Faith overcomes physical afflictions. That coming from the I don't know what that would come from.
The seven, the Sag.
Yes, faith. The seven, the Sagittarius card. Fight discord with faith in oneself or in the higher power. Okay. The key word for the inner astrological meaning of the Seven of Swords is achievement. The Virgo decan, ruled by Mercury, exerts about as much assimilative qualities as one can get out of a reasoning mind. Here the mind is active, restless, and pictured by Bootes, the bear driver, who with his sickle urges the great bear about penance. The great bear we now know as reason. To further convey, and there he is in the right-hand picture here. To further convey the idea that man's thoughts yield precious fruit when carefully tended, Bootes has traditionally been associated with the vine of the grape. Hence, the wine from such a fruit becomes the stimulating elixir that drives one to greater and greater achievement. When the sun enters Virgo, the harvest ripens and the grapes are sweet and swollen on the vine, having drawn water from the earth. Grapes may grow in lush green acres and golden valleys of wine country around the world, but grapes may also be raised along steep hillsides and rocky soil. Zane says, quote, "So too, when life circumstances offer scant footing and hard, rough obstacles, we are reminded that it is possible to cultivate the finest traits of character from challenging circumstances." Those who seek spiritual growth do not need special settings, unusual circumstances, or privilege to develop the powers of their soul. The basic material needed for our soul growth is our own experience in life, whatever that may be. The following spiritual message is very important to me personally because it has helped me to live in gratitude, appreciating all my experiences in life and all the people in my life who have contributed to my experiences, either positively or negatively. I wouldn't be the new and improved person I am today without them. And for that, I am grateful. That spiritual message is, from every event of life, the soul may attract value, even as the verdant vine transforms indifferent waters into rich and sparkling wine. Very, very beautifully put. One of my favorite ones. The eights of the Minor Arcana are anchored by Major Arcanum 8, the balance, or as it is sometimes called in other traditions, justice. This Major Arcanum is ruled by Capricorn, and its key phrases are undeviating natural law and also human justice, which is limited and fallible. Our first minor here is the 8 of Scepters. The key phrase for the outer meaning of this card is political appointment. Other mundane interpretations could be business success through initiative, think before you act, that's the Mars aspect, action of a legal nature, transfer at work, or perhaps a promotion at work, prestige in the professional world. The astrological meaning of the 8 of Scepters is symbolized by the Aries decanate of Sagittarius. Is it Aquila? Aquila. The eagle, flying higher than any other earthly creature, has come to represent exploration into the spiritual realm. The fiery, pioneering spirit of Aries, coupled with the migratory instincts of Sagittarius, makes for a combination unbeatable in seeking out endeavors defining a brave new world. Restlessness is the nature of those born under this decanate, and to confine, restrict, or force them into a tiresome and repetitive lifestyle or occupation will only bring depression, hostility, and criticism. You know, I used to work for doctors, and we used to say, it's hard to make the doctors agree. It's like making eagles fly in formation. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's very important for the folks born. It's very important for the folks born under this decanate to have important goals to achieve and to dare to explore where no man has gone before, to involve the mind and seek out new facts. The key word for this decanate is exploration. The majestic eagle, after exploring the heavens and, according to many mythology, delivering the nectar of the gods to earthlings, returns to a lifelong mate. Yes, eagles mate for life. And eagles actually mate while flying, which gives a whole new meaning to Flying United, doesn't it? And this picture up here is the dance that they do. This is called cartwheeling. I've actually seen eagles do this. And they latch onto each other and they literally spin in the air while they fly real high and they hold on and then they spin through the air. And they actually make, this is their sort of their dance that they do before they're going to mate. Wow. They're really wonderful creatures. Zane writes in Spiritual Astrology, love or desire is the motive power behind every action. It also stimulates every thought. Activity takes, therefore, the direction of the strongest desire. We always have a choice, like the eagle flies, as to where our hearts and minds travel. Why not opt for the finest, the best, and the highest? The spiritual message of the 8 of Scepters is, in sleep the soul wanders on the wings of its desires to the region most attractive to it. Let that region, therefore, be the highest. Any questions or thoughts about this?
That's inspiring.
Ava Gardner, remember her? She was in the news recently. I think it was Ava or her sister. I can't remember which. But Ava Gardner used to joke it's just as easy to marry a rich man as it is to marry a
Yeah.
woman. Remember that? Well, it's just as easy to develop good habits as it is to
There you
develop
go.
bad habits. So choose the constructive ones. The Eight of Cups is next. This card's mundane keyword is extravagance. Other mundane interpretations could be a crime jag, overindulgence, don't let the heart rule the head. Uncontrolled sensitivity invites disaster, a lover's quarrel, and caution in affectional matters. And I've literally done a card reading on myself, turned this card over, and gone into a crime jag. You know, it's just amazing. The Cancer Decanate of Pisces has got to represent some kind of heavy mojo. This decanate is represented by Andromeda, the princess that was ordered chained to a rock by her mother as a sacrifice to the sea monster Cetus. But more on that story in a bit. The key phrase for the astrological meaning of this story is self-sacrifice. I'm reminded here of the death card that sends a message that nothing new can spring forth without the destruction of something else. As examples, when the car was invented, the buggy whip manufacturers went out of business. When Akhenaten's idea of monotheism was employed, the former and powerful Amun priesthood found themselves unemployed. And today, I'm sure that modern technology is quite capable of producing a nylon stocking that doesn't run, but then what would become of the nylon stocking industry? In other words, it's almost impossible to advance any new system or idea which would benefit mankind at large without displacing or somehow harming another group of people. Therefore, progress is only gained through conflict, unfortunately. In fact, progress is simply a process of overcoming obstacles along the way. There are many people, and I've shown a couple of them here throughout history, who have tried to benefit mankind and have suffered the consequences. For example, Jesus. We all know what happened to him. Our own President Lincoln, who was very unpopular during his administration for fighting to free the slaves, and who was assassinated, as was Martin Luther King Jr. in his civil rights effort. There was the imprisoned Galileo, pictured here, the famous scientist and astronomer who proclaimed that the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around. There was Braveheart, the Scottish freedom fighter, as portrayed by Mel Gibson. Moses, John the Baptist, and the list goes on and on. Andromeda was lashed to a rock as a sacrifice to protect the townspeople from the ravages of Cetus, the sea monster. But alas, she was saved by her handsome prince Perseus, the love of her life, and whom she would have never met had she not been made a sacrifice. We heard this story of the deacon of Cetus before, and we'll hear it again tonight. It keeps coming up in the tarot story, the stories of the miners, that particular story. The next card is the Eight of Coins. It's a combination of Libra, Gemini, Capricorn, Mercury, and Venus. It is a wild combination of money and love and legal affairs. Sounds like the makings of a soap opera. Its mundane key phrase is a costly lawsuit, which is most of the time divorce, or many of the times divorce. And most of the time that's how the card reads. There's usually some kind of lawsuit going on. And I always try the suggested key phrase first, and if that doesn't work, then I try other interpretations. Romance for money, study for promotion, perseverance at work brings reward, travel for love or money, marital litigations. based on the Libra decadent of Gemini and the constellation of Canis Major. Is it any wonder that the key word for this decadent is fidelity? As any dog lover will tell you, there is no more faithful animal on earth than a dog. A master is to a dog as God is to us. Those born under this decadent are particularly faithful either to their companions or to some high ideal. Also, those born under this decadent have a better chance than most of finding a compatible partner. The key word for the astrological meaning of this card is fidelity. Dogs are very smart creatures, and they learned a long time ago when they were all wolves that wherever man is, so there is food, scraps, and garbage heaps. Man learned that dogs were the first in camp to warn them of danger, that they were willing to die in their defense, and that they could haul, carry, herd, and hunt for them. For thousands of years, man and dog have lived and evolved together side by side, needing each other for their very survival. Is it any wonder, then, that we can look to dogs and see the best of ourselves? For it is only when dogs are wild, rabid, or have been abused that they are dangerous. Mostly dogs are the embodiment of joy itself. And why do you suppose this is? Well, because all they can be is themselves in the moment. They know themselves, what they want, what they need, who they love, and what they are supposed to do. No questions asked. They can do nothing at all that isn't true to themselves. There's a bumper sticker out there that I love, and it says, "If only I could be half the person my dog thinks I am." Well, if we aspire to live up to our dog's expectations, one thing we would have to do is be true to ourselves, just like they are. The spiritual message of this card is, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man." I just love that. The key phrase for the Monday meeting of the Eight of Swords is loss of honor or business failure, or maybe both. The other mundane interpretations for this card are, life's limitations bring strength. That's a positive take on the card. Struggle to maintain balance. Frustration resulting from confining experiences. Added responsibility brings worry. Disrupted routine of living. Both the astrological and spiritual meanings of this card is symbolized by the vast constellation of Hercules. In the human experience, very few of us get away without laboring. Laboring in the fields, the office, the garden, the kitchen, repairing and culturing. What better symbol to represent this very large portion of the human experience than the mightiest of all laboring men, Hercules. And there he is, the big guy. He is best known for accomplishing 12 great self-imposed labors. The 12 labors can be related to the 12 signs of the zodiac, wherein each sign contains a worst quality and a best quality. Naturally, to move from the worst quality of a sign to the best quality of a sign requires a great deal of effort and practice. Just as Hercules chose to labor, so each of us must take on the responsibility of manifesting the best qualities of each sign. The old adage comes to mind, practice makes perfect. My art teacher told me once, you'll have to paint a mile of paper before you'll begin to see any improvement. All of these goals require experience, which is the key word for the astrological meaning of the Eight of Swords. By experience, we learn to feel satisfaction when we are doing the best that we can possibly do, and to recognize when we're not living up to our best possibilities. The spiritual message is, perform conscientiously whatever work comes to thy hand, and because of thy experience, greater things to perform will be given thee. Ready to move on to the 9s. The 9s are anchored by Major Arcanum 9, the Sage. Unlike the Hermit of most other decks, our Sage is not a recluse, but works within society, spreading illumination, guidance, knowledge, and humanitarian gifts. He is ruled by Aquarius, ruler of knowledge and all that is humane. Just as the number 7 represents septenary or physical law, the number 9 represents astral law. 9 is a magic number. In numerology, 9 represents the accumulated experience of all other numbers. In mathematics, 9 is a solvent number. When multiplied by any other number, those digits added together resolve into 9 again. For example, 2 times 9 equals 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9, and so on and so forth. In grammar school decades ago when I attended, we were taught to check our addition and subtraction by casting out 9s, and some of you may remember that in grammar school. In accounting, if you can't rectify an amount and the difference is a number that adds up to 9, for example, 36 cents, then the accountant knows that there was a transposition mistake in the calculation. Very interesting. 9 represents the astral, or the realm of thought. Our first 9 is the 9 of Scepters. It speaks mostly to the sage, as its key phrase is a wise and profitable friendship. Because of its Sag, Leo, Sun rulership, some of the other mundane interpretations for this card are happiness from children, success in the entertainment field, friends influence business, knowledge of human nature leads to popularity, business success depends upon prudence. The 9 of Scepters represents the 3rd Leo decanate of Sagittarius, pictured in the heavens as an arrow. This arrow in the bow of Mithra is the one that pierced a rock, which then issued forth a great gush of water. The story symbolizes the soul piercing the illusions of matter, thus comprehending life's divine source and henceforth quenching its thirst at the fountain of divine consciousness. Those born under this sign between December 12th and December 22nd may either take the low road of pleasure or climb the high road to spiritual illumination. Sometimes they take both roads. The astrological key for the 9 of Scepters, therefore, is illumination. Zane writes in Spiritual Astrology, the arrow symbolizes the speed of thought, its unswerving aim, and its ability to strike the mark. As shafts of light penetrate the darkness, so do the higher powers of the soul pierce the clouds of illusions. Very poetic. He goes on to say that it is not the force of the arrow, nor is it the physical movement or action of the arrow alone that dissipates the darkness, but it is action and wisdom accompanied by love. Zane writes, love and wisdom are the avenues through which alone the advance of the soul is made. And I think that this phrase is so important that I put it in your notes. Zane's spiritual text is as follows. Concentration is the arrow that pierces the illusions of matter and makes possible high accomplishments. And there is the little phrase that I quoted a minute ago. Love and wisdom are the avenues through which alone the advance of the soul is made. And I just want to go back a second here. 9 of Scepters. Where is that picture? There it is. I googled wisdom, and this was the picture of that. Which I think really does sort of depict a wisdom, doesn't it? Sort of walking into the light somehow. And of course we have Sagittarius' arrow here piercing the rock that makes the water. And this is Moses down here in the really, they come from all this backstory, from Egypt and mythology.
Right.
Yeah. The Nine of Cups is represented by the Scorpio decanate of Pisces, and the key phrase for this card is hope. Hopes will be realized. In the tradition of Tarot, this card is often called the wish card, meaning that your wishes will come true. Some of the other mundane interpretations for this card are passion supplanted by exalted love, a love of humanity, search for domestic harmony, strong desire for affection, wisdom in the affairs of the heart, change in domestic affairs. The astrological keyword for the Nine of Cups is vicissitudes. What does that mean? It is a word hardly used anymore, meaning change, alternating change, and mutation. This is the last decanate in the zodiac and is pictured in the heavens by the constellation of Cassiopeia. There she is in the upper left, a queen seated on her throne. This queen is the subject of two very different stories. In the one story, and one that we've already heard this evening a couple of times, she brags she is lovelier than even Juno. The gods, being angered, demanded that she sacrifice her daughter Andromeda to the sea monster Cetus, who would otherwise ravage their land. In another story, Cassiopeia gave her children a ram that bore the golden fleece and carried them to heaven. We find, therefore, that those born under this decanate have eventful lives and may enter and succeed in a variety of careers. As the last decanate of the zodiac, it tends to restate or summarize events and conditions that we expect to find in all other decanates. Thus, the changes, mutations, or alternations, changing into a new cycle. To understand the spiritual message of the Nine of Cups, it is wise to focus on the Scorpio aspect of this card. Scorpio rules the 8th house of the afterlife. It is during the season of Scorpio that we celebrate Halloween, the time when the veil separating the physical and the spiritual is very permeable. The Scorpio decanate of Pisces marks the end of the zodiac and the completion of one full zodiacal cycle before transitioning into a new cycle. This decanate also represents the highest and lowest astral spheres, a reflection of the eagle and the scorpion. Cassiopeia, sitting at the end of the zodiac, removes a cloak that represents the physical body. In her other hand, she holds a branch from the tree of life. It looks a little like a feather to me, but there it is. Symbolizing uplifting spiritual conditions. After the soul leaves the physical body, it experiences the effect of the astral circuit that has been established. And I use this picture over here to sort of depict, our soul being attached to the earth in one way or another. The circuit may become like Andromeda's shackle if attachments to the material world are too strong. Or the circuit may become like the branch of the tree of life, uplifting spiritual conditions if the circuit is generated by tender love and unselfish affection. The spiritual message of the Nine of Cups is, man may pass from this life to the next, even through death, with no greater break in his affairs than would be occasioned by leaving his acquaintances in one city and taking up his activities in another city amid a different group of friends. Nice to know.
Sounds easy.
It sounds so easy.
Yeah.
Like that, please.
In other words, the afterlife is similar to the one we lead now because we will be attracted to those with similar rates of vibration. The key phrase for the 9 of coins is money spent on associates. This could be a business luncheon, a full-blown party, or a donation to a club or association. Other mundane interpretations for this card could be money gained through inventiveness, common sense to increase income, further education to demand a higher wage, unexpected gift from a friend, or remuneration based on mental activity. Well, our old friend the Papa Bear from the story of Goldilocks is back because this Aquarius decanate of Gemini is ruled by Ursa Major, a big Papa Bear named Reason. And reason is indeed the key word for the astrological inner meaning of this card. Traveling around the pole star, this bear is huge in size and symbolizes the immense power that may be welded by thought. Those born under this sign accomplish great things through their mental activity. They mainly rely on their talented minds and reason, but must also cultivate a sense of idealism to counter what could manifest as self-centered ego, I should say. The Greeks tell a story of an ancient race of giants who were called Titans. These Titans were so confident in their strength that they stormed the gates of heaven. Relying on the reports of the physical senses, which is reason, the Titans believed that they could conquer the realm of heaven. They were wrong, and they were defeated. From this story, however, it should not be assumed that reason and the reports of the physical senses are without value, or that the Titans did not serve a purpose. Just as the 2 stars in the outer bowl of the Dipper making up the shoulder of the Great Bear point directly to the pole star, truth, the power of reason lies in its ability to indicate the direction of truth. The direction of truth. Truth, though, is actually found in the unconscious or intuitive mind, as we learned in Goldilocks. The most famous of the defeated Titans, Atlas, who is shown over there on the right, symbolizes the importance and role of reason, because in mythology, he is compelled to forever support the heavens on his head and hands. The spiritual message of this card is, reason points the way to truth and offers valuable means by which the accuracy of the reports of the psychic senses can be tested. So oftentimes we'll have maybe a little psychic hunch or experience, and then we go out and we look for the truth of it, right? Mm-hmm. We try to reason it out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can't reason it out, but sometimes we try. Okay, the last of the Minors card. Hold your applause down, please. It's not quite the end of the class, but this is the 9 of Swords, okay? The key phrase for the outer meaning of the 9 of Swords is quarrel resulting in enmity. One thing about studying C.C. Zane is you get to become familiar with a lot of words, a lot of unusual words. Enmity, which is hard to say if you don't really think about it, means hatred, mutual hatred, hostility, antagonism, rancor. Enmity may be obvious hatred or may just hide somewhere. Other outer meanings for this card could be poverty overcome by wisdom, that's the sage kicking in, sickness of a loved one, discordant working environment, fixed mental attitudes bar achievement, and letting go of old conditions. With all those swords there, it looks like severing, you know. The 9 of Swords represents the Taurus decanate of Virgo. This decanate is symbolized in the heavens by a crown of 12 iron spikes called Corona Borealis. Because Virgo primarily corresponds to the house of work, people born under this sign are most often happiest when they are in the service of others or working for a noble cause. Of course, those people who are engaged in the service of others or a noble cause are often asked to give up many things that they would prefer to do. How many times have we read a sticker that reads, I'd rather be fishing, or I'd rather be sailing, or I'd rather be something? Sometimes our noble cause is just paying the bills, right? There are many long days inside an office cubicle when we're thinking about what we'd rather be doing. The key word for the inner astrological meaning of this card is renunciation, which means giving up, refusing, or renouncing. The sign of Virgo rules the house that governs work, illness, and servitude, experiences that are almost unavoidable in the human condition. Zane writes in Spiritual Astrology, I think I'll go back. The fruits of life, whether they be tares or wholesome grain, are harvested from experience. What that harvest shall be is not determined by the nature of the experiences, but by the mental and emotional reaction toward them. In the final winnowing, all except the golden grain of character is blown away as tares and chaff. What Zane is saying here is that no matter what comes our way in this human experience, it is up to us to glean character development from that experience by developing a positive attitude towards it. There's an old expression out there that I can't remember exactly, but it's something like, whatever you survive can make you a better person. Each zodiacal sign has its own particular type of affliction. Therefore, the crown called Corona Borealis has 12 iron spikes and pictures the reward of character triumphing over trials and tribulations. One of the best stories to depict this reward from affliction is that of Job in the biblical story. Job was a devout and prosperous man who gave constant praise to God for his many blessings. He was, unfortunately, the object of a bet between God and Satan, if you can imagine that, and ultimately triumphed over all trials and afflictions bestowed to him by the devil and rewarded by God for doing so. And so now we'll go on here. Here's Job up here, just afflicted, lost his home, and has covered with boils. He's a mess. But he triumphed over his challenges. And here's the crown of Aurora Borealis. It doesn't show 12 iron spikes, but it does show 12 points. And here's how the crown is often used, to show triumphing over obstacles, victory over adversity. Here we have the 4 kids from Narnia. Each of them received a crown. Here's the crown of thorns, used in a slightly different way, but meaning somewhat the same. And if y'all can remember this, the Queen for a Day. Queen for a Day. This is one of those shows I grew up on, as many of us did. It's amazing what you can find on Google. And these gals, they get on TV and they say, oh, I lost my refrigerator, or my roof is leaking or something.
And I have 20 children.
And I have 20 children, and how can I? And if you got the most applause, right? And they had an applause meter, remember, with an arrow on it that went back and forth, then you were crowned queen for a day, and you were given whatever you needed, like a new refrigerator or a new roof or something. It was crazy.
That's where those shows came from.
Yeah. Yes, that's where they came from.
See where that history thing gets so
Anyway, the spiritual text of this card is, he who would live the life of the Spirit here and now upon this earth, seen and known of men, must have fortitude, strength of character, in times of adversity. And when they have that, they get the crown.
If the applause meter is...
The last 4 cards that we're talking about in this class are anchored by Major Arcanum 10, the wheel. The key words for the wheel are change or disruption, whether it is for good or for bad. Because this card is ruled by Uranus, a planet whose energy is erratic, The change or disruption indicated by the wheel is sudden change, not change occurring over a long period of time. Another property of Uranus is originality and individualism, characteristics that will also be represented by the tens within their suit. The tens differ from the minors because they do not correspond to a decanate, and therefore do not have inner meanings or spiritual meanings. In most other traditions, the tens are considered part of the minors just because they are numbered cards. In the Brotherhood of Light tradition, they correspond to the change of seasons. Let's take a look at the tens all at once before we look at them individually. Notice that they do not have a decanate signature in the upper right-hand corner, as do the minors. Instead, they have the fixed sign animal representing their suit. So the tens are pretty straightforward. We're going to look at them like we did the mundane expression of the minors, as a combination of their anchor, the wheel, and the expression of each suit. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Our first 10 is the 10 of Scepters. The key phrase for this card is an invention or discovery. Clearly, this card is an expression of Uranus's originality and individuality combined with the passion of the fire signs. Other interpretations for this card may be new business methods, a change in status, alternation of working conditions, variety of personal activities, and take initiative to maintain balance. There are many more interpretations found in Dora Stone's book. And when you go home and study this book as an addendum to what you've learned in this class, I'd like you to take a moment to realize that many of her interpretations simply serve as positive encouragement to what might be a challenging time. I didn't include many examples of these advisory interpretations when we were going over the minors, because the minors are confusing enough as it is. But I want to include at least one example as we're reviewing the tens, because they are less complicated and easier to wrap our minds around. In the last example I offered here is what I'm talking about. Take initiative to maintain balance. In other words, the challenge coming may not be for the best, but these words you can use to encourage your querent, which we are always endeavoring to do. Ready? The key phrase for the 10 of Cups is, and
Alan, you went through 2.
oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
There we go. Is an unconventional affectional interest. Well, we have to remember that these cards come to us from ancient history, and over the course of era after era, what is considered unconventional has changed. Even during America's history, it was considered against the law for couples of mixed race to marry. And in contrast, Mormons were allowed to have many wives legally. Today, just the opposite is true. Today, the idea of a mixed racial marriage is legal and accepted in our society. But now we're debating the idea of homosexual marriage, which, like mixed racial marriage, will probably someday be quite accepted and legal in our society as well. What is unconventional sometimes depends upon one's individual viewpoint. So how do we determine what an unconventional relationship is? Well, we just say the word unconventional, and most of the time, the querent will know what you mean. The querent may be involved in a relationship where one partner is much older than the other, one partner is married to someone else, the relationship is secret for some reason, both partners are the same sex, or belong to different races, or speak different languages. It goes on and on. Some of the other interpretations for this card are Avoid emotional crossfire. We know that this is a word of encouragement. Inconstant or changeable emotions. Numerous and unusual friends. Unexpected ocean voyage. It's all about the water sign in this interpretation. Sudden love affair. Forgotten taxes. This refers to the water sign of Scorpio. Moving on. The key phrase for the Ten of Coins is alternate financial loss and gain. Other interpretations could be give and receive reciprocally, unexpected air travel, right? This is an air sign. Inventiveness brings financial gain, money gained through associates, shaky speculation, and financial worries concerning a friend. Gather and direct energies, a word of encouragement. The last card to review. Keep your applause down, please. Oh boy. The Ten of Swords is a tough one. The key phrase for this card is sudden loss of employment, but it usually means a total free fall, where maybe it's not just the job, but a combination of things that just vary the querent. If any of you are familiar with the Universal Weight Deck, this is the fellow pictured prone here. And face down on the concrete, his head bleeding, and 10 swords stabbing him in the back. However, there is a sunrise in the distance, and the injured party is maintaining a sign of blessing. You can just barely see it here. Oops. Right there. He's got the little sign of blessing in his hand.
What is that?
Pardon me?
What do you mean?
He's holding his hands like this. It's a sign of blessing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's hard to notice these things. You have to really look at these cards. So this card, even though it portends of rough times, it also suggests that after the smoke clears, all will be well again, and perhaps even better. Some of the other interpretations are expose or scandal leading to practical changes, static conditions in personal affairs, victim of eccentric afflictions, do not abandon wishes but keep trying. There's that card of encouragement. You could be your own worst enemy in adaptation to environment. As I discussed in my earlier course, Beginning Egyptian Tarot, an easy way to practice with the minors is to set them up like this, with the major and the 4 minors around it, and study the various interpretations given by Doris Stone, and make up some of your own. Just think about it. Just, write some down yourself, and then you'll kind of get the idea. Before ending this class, it's important to pass on to you one of C.C. Zhang's most important illustrations in understanding the sacred tarot and its correspondences to astrology. And it is called the Tarot Key. And if you will recall at the very beginning, I talked about the silver and gold key, and this would be the silver key, the Tarot Key. I've made it available to you to download, and it can be also found on page 36 of the latest edition of the Sacred Tarot. And it is also found in that little instruction booklet that comes with the Brotherhood of Light deck, but that one's awfully hard to read. So let's take a look at it for a moment, and I'll begin with the tooth part here at the bottom. And this tiny part down here illustrates the relationship between the 4 elements, the 4 fixed signs, the signs of the zodiac, and their relationship to the court cards and their degrees of emanation. The stem here shows the major arcana and their corresponding planets and signs. And the handle of the key here shows all the decanets that we just went through, with the fixed signs highlighted on the outside of the ring here. I won't go any further into the explanation of this key because I believe that it is meant for individual contemplation. And so I encourage you to keep it with your notes, your books, and your personal insights and experience with tarot. I'd like to end this class with a quote from Sacred Tarot by C.C. Zane, which is found on page 37. The student of Tarot may expect in his study of the wide range of symbols employed in the Tarot to be made thoroughly conversant with a language which has been employed by learned men in all ages and all climes to import the most profound truths, a language which, because of its wide appeal, does not essentially vary with the passage of time. The Tarot is the one standard textbook on the meaning of universal symbols. And with that, I'm going to invite you to contact me at ally@light.org. There is my email address, and this is part of your notes. If you have any questions or comments about this class as time goes by and in your future studies. And with that, I bid you good night and a fantastic journey.
Could you just very quickly mention the announcements? Because although a couple of people have gone, nobody heard them.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know if anybody heard them. But
All right.
Then a bunch of people came on.
A bunch
and I mean, just you could just quickly the most important part. You know,
Okay.
Christopher's class coming up.
Right. I think I need my little pink thing. I'm not sure where it is. I think it's here. Well, anyway, I wanted to wish you a fantastic journey into the exploration of Tarot before I go on to my announcements. And I had a great time teaching this class. And now I'll give you very much. And before we leave this evening, I'd like to point out that Yvette Fortin's last class in Esoteric Psychology takes place this Sunday, August 29th, between 3 and 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. This has been a fascinating class, and I do encourage you to watch this last class. Astrological Indicators for Success. This is a Thursday evening class hosted by Christopher Gibson. It begins September 9th and runs through October 14th. Between 6:30 and 8:30 p.m. this time frame here on churchoflight.tv, and also locally here in town. Every other Sunday that's not service Sunday, the locals may join Vega Osiki right here at headquarters in discussing the building blocks of astrology. And I believe that that is it. And we have our Sunday service, of course, the third Sunday of the month. And I think the next one is September 19th, isn't it? I think that's the date.
I think that's it.
Right. So we hope you've enjoyed this evening and this class. And I certainly enjoyed teaching you. And I wish you all good night.